and how you're organising to respond to it. Thanks so much. Can I bring Stephen in now? Stephen is the Shadow Minister with responsibility for the Far East, I believe, for the Labour front bench. And it's a real privilege to have support from the Labour front bench here at our rally. So thank you, Stephen. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you very much, Gareth. Thanks to Solidarity with Hong Kong. And can I just say what an honour it is to share this virtual platform with you, Lee. I'm just so concerned about the bullying and intimidation and vindictive behaviour of the Chinese Communist Party that you've just outlined. And I am so inspired by the courage that you are showing. I also had a conference call a little while back with Joshua Wong, and I know that Nathan Law is of course now in this country and is continuing the struggle. And I just wanted to say that we stand shoulder to shoulder with you as a Labour Party and as a movement. And it's so great to see such a range of Labour colleagues and voices on this call today. I just wanted to start by saying, you know, just to get this clear, we have the deepest respect for the history and culture and traditions of China. And it's very, very important, I think, that we constantly underline the respect that we have for the Chinese people, history and culture. Our problem is with the Chinese Communist Party. And what I think we have to do is combine our respect for the country with a very strong dose of realism that has been missing for a decade now about what the true agenda of the Chinese Communist Party is. And I think it's also important to note that there isn't really a global issue that can be effectively tackled without the constructive engagement of the Chinese government, whether it's climate change, cybersecurity, dealing with global pandemics, you name it, we need that global cooperation. So it's really important to set those two key points out there. The question is then, how do you get there? How do you develop a more constructive engagement, which we hope would lead to a change in behavior from President Xi's regime, not least when it comes to Hong Kong. And I think that's really about having a much more clear-sighted view of what the Chinese Communist Party's strategy is. For many years, there was a view that there was a sort of gradual alignment with the international rules-based order and norms as China became more integrated into the global economy under the sort of incremental reforms that were started by Deng Xiaoping. It's been clear for a very long time that that was a very naive understanding of what was going on. And then once President Xi was appointed in 2013, I think all pretense went out of the window. And we've seen since 2013 an aggressively expansionist approach, increasingly authoritarian. We've of course seen President Xi's essentially made himself president for life. We've seen appalling abuses of human rights in Xinjiang province of the Uyghur people, appalling abuses of human rights in Hong Kong. We've seen military expansionism and increasing belligerence in the South China Sea. We've seen the Belt and Road Initiative developing into a kind of debt trap diplomacy where many, many countries are becoming increasingly reliant on China but the strings attached are that you can't speak out and call out the unacceptable behaviors of the CCP. We've seen an increase in things like the theft of intellectual property, of dumping of Chinese product on the markets, leading to massive issues for domestic manufacturing in countries like the UK. And we've of course seen this so-called golden era strategy that was proclaimed by David Cameron and George Osborne in 2015 has been an abject failure. Cameron and Osborne rolled out the red carpet for Beijing, and what do we have? We have still a £22 billion trade deficit. We have 229 supply chains that are still reliant on China, of which 57 are classed as critical infrastructure. We have an overdependence economically, and that affects the ability of the British government to speak out against the unacceptable abuses of human rights. So the golden era strategy has been a disaster for our country, and I would argue as well a disaster in terms of the relationship between the UK and China, because there's no respect really for a country. The CCP respects strength and unity and consistency, and is contemptuous of inconsistency and weakness. And what I would also say is that David Cameron and George Osborne are the kind of archetypal globalists based on sort of the unfettered rise of globalization, leading to a kind of sweatshop model of globalization. And we've seen this, I think what the New Statesman has called a Faustian pact between the forces of global capital and China, with the two playing off each other. And in fact, China being the so-called workshop of the world has led to a race to the bottom in terms of standards, wages, and all of the things that people on this call believe in so passionately in terms of supporting the struggle of the workers' struggle and the trade union movement. And so let's be absolutely clear that the golden era was a pact between the Conservatives' outright approach to unfettered globalization and the convenient partner that they found in China. The question then is, what now? Where do we go from here? And we do have a big challenge here, because the other problem with the Conservative Party is that their completely cack-handed handling of Brexit has led to the UK being seen as an alliance breaker rather than an alliance maker. And this is a time in our history where now more than ever, we need to be united as an international community, standing up for human rights and the values that we believe in. But that's going to be difficult for this government, who've been the architects of burning so many bridges between the UK and other countries. But again, we've got to do it. And this is, I think, where the Labour Party needs to step up and highlight and underline consistently our internationalist values and credentials. We are the alliance makers, and we've got to start being ready to become a Labour government that is going to build those alliances, both with our European partners, but also vitally important is with those countries in the Asia-Pacific region that share our democratic values and principles. Japan, Australia, Indonesia, South Korea. These are vitally important partners, and we need to be doing much more to be building strongly with those countries to stand up to the authoritarian excesses of the Chinese Communist Party. And then at home, domestically, the UK needs to have a much more integrated strategy where we're looking at things like our technology. We've seen the complete mess that's been made over Huawei because we haven't invested in our own homegrown industries. We need to be very careful about hostile takeovers by Chinese companies and investment vehicles of some of our strategic national assets and important companies that we need to be actually saying, look, the UK has to look at national security as a vitally important part of our economic policy. So I think there's two pieces there in terms of what a Labour government, what Labour in opposition should be saying, and what a Labour government would be doing, both abroad and at home. We need to be absolutely clear that we are going to be active and constructively engaged in this space, because if we leave this space to the right wing of the Conservative Party, there is a risk that it will slip over into xenophobia and some of the xenophobic comments that we see from the likes of Donald Trump. So we've got to have a clear and distinctive argument which is about human rights, principles, values, but also being quite tough and united with other democratic partners so that we are making it clear where the red lines are and where there has to be a cost that is paid by the Chinese Communist Party when they step over those lines. Then I just wanted to close by making a couple of more specific remarks about Hong Kong particularly. The BNO passport holder offer is a welcome step, and Labour has absolutely supported that. It is the right thing to do. But there are still a number of unanswered questions, and we'll be holding the government's feet to the fire on that. What support will be provided to young pro-democracy activists who were born after the 1997 cutoff date? When will this new fast-track application system for BNO passport holders be up and running in practice? What are the potential repercussions? China has threatened, the Chinese Communist Party has threatened retaliation, both in terms of the action we've taken on Hong Kong, but also on Huawei. What could those steps be? We need to be ready for that. We need to see the government having a clear strategy for being able to deal with potential retaliation from Beijing. How can we support those in Hong Kong who've had their assets frozen? And what can we do to persuade more countries around the world to make similar offers in terms of BNO? The other key point I would make is the Magnitsky sanctions. It's very welcome that the British government finally, after 2 years of having the primary legislation in place, has finally brought forward the regulations that enable the setting up of Magnitsky sanctions, which is very targeted visa bans and asset freezes on human rights abusers. But it was very disappointing that there wasn't a single CCP official on the list of the first wave that Dominic Raab announced a couple of weeks ago. When you look at the appalling abuses in Xinjiang province, and I think there is a real case to look at some of the behaviors of officials, both in terms of the Hong Kong government and Beijing when it comes to Hong Kong. So what about Magnitsky? Why aren't the Chinese officials on that list? We will be pushing and holding the government to account on that. But what I would say about BNO is it is a welcome step, but I prefer liberation to evacuation. I am absolutely sure that great patriots like Lee and Joshua Wong and Nathan Law would want to be staying and struggling and engaging in non-violent protest to achieve the objectives that they want. And so the aim, whilst BNO is a welcome step, the aim has to be to get the Chinese Communist Party to change its behaviors, change its outlook, to persuade President Xi and others that they are overreaching and they are seeing the united nature of the opposition that's coming to them from the international community. And that means that they need to rethink, they need to change their behavior. And that, I think, has got to be the overarching strategic objective of all of this. And the Labour movement must play a vital role in that. We are an internationalist movement. We must lead an international response. Thank you very much.